Do you find it hard to sight read chords? Does your mind go blank whenever you see chords? Then keep watching this video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Manu from Piano Sight Reading, where I give sight reading tips to pianists. And in this video, we're going to be looking at chords. Now, if you freak out whenever you see chords, well, let me tell you, you're not alone. And let's face it, chords are difficult for a reason. The moment you have 3 or more notes to sight read at once, it gets pretty difficult. And if you play piano, then you have no choice but to play chords. I mean, that's what we do. We have the melody and we have the accompaniment. So you will have to play chords at some stage. But luckily, there are some chords that we come across all the time, and those are triads. So in case you don't know, a triad is a chord made up of 3 notes. For example, if we take a G major triad, it would be this, with G at the bottom, B and D. And these 3 notes can be arranged in different order, in different inversions. So this one is called the root position, where the root is at the bottom of the chord. But now if you take the bottom note and flip it to the top, you get this one, which is the first inversion. And if you again flip the bottom note to the top note, you get the second inversion. So let's look at each of these in turn. So a root position triad is made up of 2/3, or 2 skips if you like. And this is the easiest triad to identify because it's made up of 3 line notes or 3 space notes. And the fingering is the same in both hands, which is 1, 3 and 5. Now if we look at the second inversion, we now have a 3rd at the bottom and a 4th at the top. And for this, we use 1, 2, 5 in the right hand and 5, 3, 1 in the left hand. And then the second inversion is the other way around. So now you have the 4th at the bottom and the 3rd at the top. And the fingering is also swapped. Now the right hand uses 1, 3, 5 and 5, 2, 1 in the left hand. So a tip to read these chords is to look at the bottom notes and then to look at the shape of the chord, whether it's a root position chord or whether the 3rd is at the bottom or at the top of the chord. And like I mentioned in this video where I talk about how to identify intervals, you don't need to know whether a chord is major or minor when you're sight reading. You just don't have the time to work that out. Figure out the bottom notes and look at the shape of the chords. And just keep the key signature in mind in case you have to play a sharp or a flat. So that's how to identify chords quickly, but you also need to be able to play chords quickly. And even better if you can play chords by feel alone, so without having to look down at your hands. So for that, I suggest that you practice chord exercises. Let me show you a few examples. You could play triads all in root position in one particular scale. So for example, if we take G major, and so you start on G and you go all the way up. And then you can go back down. And just make sure that you include the sharps or flats that are in that key. Another version of that exercise would be to play the same thing, but all first inversion chords. Or second inversion chords. So that's another exercise is to pick one chord and to play all the inversions. For example, if you take C major, so you start with the root position and then you play the other versions just make sure that you use the right fingering and do that in both hands. Something else you can do is just take any piece of music that has chords and to sight read through it one hand at a time if you like. So just get used to reading chords. And lastly, you could check out these two videos where I've made chord drills. Now you might be wondering,
well, what about chords that are not triads? What about chords with 4 or 5 notes? What do you do then?
Well, that's the topic of a different video, but in a nutshell, what you would do there is to look at the intervals that make up your chord. So you need to get very good at identifying intervals, and for that you can check out this video. So to recap, when you see chords, first, well, don't freak out. Look at the bottom note, look at the shape of the chord. If it's not a root position triad, look at where the third is. Try to use the proper fingering. Practice chord exercises and chord drills. And for more complex chords, practice identifying intervals. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, then please like it and share it with your fellow musicians. And feel free to ask me any questions you may have. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy sight reading!